Hi, this is Vivian, and welcome to my advocacy project. I want to thank you all for bearing through with me, and I'm really excited to share the results of my project. It's titled Exploring High School Options for 8th Grade Students. And first thing I want to do is give you a school profile of Lou Dantzler. And this is where I've been teaching for 2 years, and it's located on Challenger's Boys and Girls Club campus in South LA. It's on Vermont between Martin Luther King and Slauson Avenue. It has about 300 students. 96% of these students are African American, 4% are Latino, and 98% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. ISEF, it is part of the ISEF schools, and ISEF schools operates about 10 schools, including elementary, middle, and high schools. And moving on to the problem, because Lou Dantzler Middle School is part of ISEF, a lot of the ISEF middle school students just kind of filter on through this charter network. And unfortunately, the charter network is not the most high-performing school options in the area. And so a lot of the middle schools are feeder schools for the high schools. So when middle school students are looking for high schools, they just kind of fill out the applications to go to an ISEF high school because they don't have the information that would allow them to understand what the high school options are around them. And so the problem is that these 8th grade students are going to start sending out applications, and most of them are going to go to ISEF high schools because they don't have any other information about the other high schools that are available to them that are more than likely better performing schools. Now, part of this problem is multiplied by the fact that Lou Dantzler Middle School does not have any guidance counselors. And while there are 1 or 2 part-time academic counselors, they are reserved for students with behavioral issues. And so the average student does not have the time with the academic counselors. And the academic counselors are mostly for how to improve in the classes that they are already in. They're not for how to choose the best high school options for our students. So my advocacy project then is to develop a curriculum for students to explore their best high school options. My most important goal of this is to have students be informed so that they know exactly what they are getting into when they go to a college or when they go to a high school, and to know what their best options are for their high school. And so in order to do this, the end product would be to have students develop a multimedia presentation for their top 3 high school options. In order to do this, the students are going to include why they chose the school, how they can come up with how that school can help them to achieve their goals, and the logistics for applying to that school and getting to and from that school. So say if that school is outside of the parents' driving radius, then they could take public transportation. And what lines could they take? Could they take the 52? How much would it cost them? Is that feasible? And so really to hone in on those best options that are available to them. And so the way that I went about doing this is by garnering student interest and investment into why it's important to research high schools. And so before, I would ask some students and say, which high school are you going to? And they would be like, I don't know, probably just, the one down the street or an ISEF one. And so really getting students invested in why researching high schools was important was definitely a good first step in my advocacy project. Students definitely needed to be presented with the information that other schools are giving to their middle school students. So at high-performing middle schools, other students would probably have information that my students do not have. And so it's very important that just because my students are not from a high-performing middle school, that they're still getting those same advantages, that they're still getting that same information that will allow them to be to attend a high-performing high school and to be successful in one. This also empowers students by giving them that research opportunity to look up high-performing schools in their own neighborhoods. And it also has them reflect upon a list of what students will find essential in their high school that they will eventually choose. And then it develops their speaking skills by having them deliver their information that they've found and delivering it to just a small group of students. And what this will do is if students research 3 high schools each, then at the end of their presentations, then they will be able to have a overview of the high-performing high schools in Los Angeles. So the outcomes of my advocacy project were that students were excited to research high schools, and they were excited to just kind of have that flexibility to go ahead and start being in charge of the information that they would eventually use to choose their high schools. So they were able to look up school ratings, and they were able to learn what some high schools had to offer and what other high schools had to offer. And so it was really awesome for them to compare what different options high schools offered. And they started this by looking up just a Google search of high-performing schools in Los Angeles. Then they went through and made a list of their essential must-haves. They then went on to greatschools.org and searched by their own zip code. And then they researched the schools individually as to what were the highest performing schools in their area, and then how they could get to and from that school, that one of those 3 schools that they had chosen. Then once they chose their top 3 schools, then they could go ahead and download those applications. And the hope was for them to have enough information to be able to talk to their parents and have those conversations about how they would like to attend a high-performing school and why, and how that could help them in the future. One of the negative outcomes, or one of the outcomes that I hadn't foreseen, was that the students, when they were given that flexibility to go ahead and start looking up schools, they looked up Lou Dantzler, which is our school. And they found that it had a great schools rating of 1 out of 10. They found the API score to be very low. They found different reviews that parents had left. And they also saw that it was in second-year program improvement. They read about what program improvement was. And the result was that they felt discouraged. And one of the result of that was that it was a little bit of a shock for me. They had questions that I wasn't quite ready to respond to, because they said, how can we, 1 or 2 of my students said, how could we apply to these schools if our school is so low on the rating scale? Then how can we apply to these high-performing schools and expect to be successful? We're just like, I don't think I can do it. I think it's going to be too hard for me, miss. And that really struck me. And so when I started to reflect about my next steps, I definitely, for improvements on my advocacy project, I want to make sure to involve their interests at the beginning. I want to make sure to engage my students so that by the time that we get started on looking up schools, that we've already had an open discussion about Lou Dantzler Middle School's standing, about the challenges that will come from attending a high-performing high school, and how they can adapt to those challenges. So what that would mean, did that mean that we need to go ahead and continue working on our study skills, on our writing skills, possibly have a book club so that we can enlarge our vocabulary, and just brainstorm with my students as to what would best help them to be successful and to feel confident about not just applying to, but attending a high-performing high school. Other improvements would be to form a graphic organizer to help students find information about their high schools. Most of my students were really excited to just go ahead and have that flexibility and look up on their own. But I do feel that it would be beneficial to have a graphic organizer for those students that would like some more guidance. I also think that it's very, very important that I involve parents from the beginning of the project, which is something that I didn't do. And in retrospect, that was, I feel, a big mistake on my part, because without the parent support, then the student can't go to that high school. So I think definitely providing students with methods of engaging discussions about high-performing schools with their parents is going to be something that will push this advocacy project for next year beyond just helping students have more information, but really getting students into those high-performing schools. And I think that that will be beneficial really in the long term. So it takes my small-scale advocacy project that I started this year, and it would really make it flourish for next year. Now, for follow-up steps for the current advocacy project that I have, I'm going to follow up with students' parents about applications, let them know that they have them, if they have any questions onto how to go ahead and complete those, answer any questions that I possibly could for those parents, and have that communication so that they know that we all just want the best for their children. And that's the end of my advocacy project. I will post a Google form for your feedback, and I really thank you for listening in. Have a good day.